My name is Laura Bennett. I'm 33 years old, and I live in Dallas, Texas. From the outside, my life looks pretty steady. A job in tech, a cozy little apartment downtown, and a savings account I'd been building for nearly 10 years. I used to believe that if I just kept my head down and worked hard, I'd slowly create the peaceful life I dreamed of. Turns out I was wrong. Growing up, I was used to standing in the shadow of my older sister. She was always the star in my parents' eyes, while I got labeled the independent one. That label sounds nice, but what it really meant was I never got the same support she did. I grew up in that shadow, quietly learning how to endure, how to tough it out just to survive. When I turned 30, something shifted. I started thinking it was time to live for myself. Every dollar I saved went straight into my dream of owning a home, the milestones so many Americans see as proof you've made it. And when I finally found a small, warm cottage just outside Dallas, I knew I was touching real freedom for the first time. What I didn't see coming was my family treating that decision like a solution to my sister's problems. To them, my house wasn't a home for an independent woman. It was free shelter for her and her kids. In just a few days, my dream home turned into a battleground. Constant phone calls, texts full of guilt trips, snide comments blasted on social media. And then, the breaking point, coming home from the grocery store to find my sister's SUV parked in the driveway, her entire family already moved in like it was their natural right. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just another family argument. This was about boundaries, self-respect, and the right to live my own life. And this is how it all began. If I had to pick one image that sums up my entire childhood, it would be me standing off to the side, watching my sister Rachel get treated like a princess in our own home. Rachel's 3 years older than me, beautiful, outgoing, and she's always known how to meld our parents with just a smile or a little pout. And me, Laura, I was the good girl, the one who never caused trouble. I remember one of Rachel's birthdays when she turned 10. Our backyard in Dallas was decked out with balloons, string lights, and a giant bounce castle. Neighbors came over, kids ran around. Laughter echoed down the block. My dad even hired a clown to do magic tricks, and there was Rachel, glowing at the center of it all in her sparkly pink dress. 3 years later, when I turned 10, my party fit inside the dining room. A last-minute pizza, a store-bought cake from Kroger, and a few little candles. My mom patted my head and said, "You don't need to show off like your sister. Simple is better." I smiled and nodded, but inside, I felt empty. Christmas made the gap even clearer. When Rachel was 12, she got the Barbie dream house, the big one with the working elevator, shiny furniture, every detail perfect. Me? I got a secondhand knockoff, missing the elevator completely. When I asked why my toy was different, Mom just said, "You need to appreciate what you have. You don't need expensive things to be happy." But what stung wasn't the gift. It was the way my parents' eyes lit up when Rachel unwrapped hers, a look I never once saw directed at me. Over time, I learned how to swallow my feelings. I was taught that my happiness didn't matter as much as Rachel's. If she needed a new dress for party, my parents found a way to get it. But when I asked to take an art class, the answer was, "You can handle it yourself, Laura. Don't waste money." Maybe the hardest part was how they talked about us. Rachel was always special, full of potential. Me? I heard the same words over and over. Laura's smart, independent. She doesn't need help. When I was little, I thought it was a compliment. But the older I got, the more I realized it was just an excuse to pour everything into Rachel and expect me to manage on my own. I used to stand in my bedroom, looking out the window into Rachel's room stuffed with dolls, dresses, glittery decorations. My room had an old bed and a few posters I'd picked up from the library. I told myself, one day, I'll grow up and get out of this cycle of comparison. But deep down, that little girl in me just wished, even once, to see pride in my parents' eyes, not because I could handle everything, but because I was worthy, too. Those memories never faded. They cut deep, leaving behind a quiet ache that drives me to keep proving myself not just to the world, but to my own family. At 18, I thought I'd finally get a fair shot. I had just graduated high school with an almost perfect GPA, stacked with AP classes and extracurriculars. I picked a local college in Dallas to save money, and I had a clear plan in my head: live at home, go to school, work part-time, and build up some savings along the way. I still remember the day I brought it up. My mom looked at me like I'd said something strange. "If you live here, you'll have to contribute." I blinked. Contribute? What do you mean? She said it so casually: $400 a month for rent and utilities. And food? That's on you. I was stunned. Just 3 years earlier, Rachel had all her tuition paid, her dorm covered, plus a monthly allowance from my parents. When I pointed that out, Mom just shrugged. "Rachel needs support. You're different. You're independent. You'll figure it out." So I started freshman year as a tenant in my own house. Every month, I handed my parents cash like I was paying a bill. I worked part-time at a bookstore in the mall, $9 an hour. After taxes, I barely had enough for rent, some essentials, and a little ramen money. There were days I'd walk past the Starbucks on campus, smell the coffee and fresh pastries, and feel my chest tighten. My classmates sat with lattes and croissants, laughing and studying together. Me? I walked faster, clutching a heavy bag stuffed with used textbooks and a peanut butter sandwich. At night, Rachel would call from her comfortable dorm in another state, complaining about the AC not being cold enough or her room being too small. I'd listen, wanting so badly to hang up. My car didn't even have AC. The windows were taped shut because they wouldn't roll up. But nobody seemed to care. One night, after an 8-hour bookstore shift, I came home starving. My wallet had $3 left. I bought the cheapest ramen I could find and cooked it in my parents' kitchen. While the water boiled, I heard Mom on the phone in the living room with Rachel. "Don't worry, we just sent you some extra money so you'll be more comfortable. College is hard enough. You shouldn't have to struggle." I stared at my bowl of noodles, my throat tight. Why had those words never been said to me? But like always, I swallowed the lump in my throat along with the noodles. I told myself, if no one's gonna save me, I'll save myself. I couldn't afford new textbooks, so I hunted through used bookstores or waited at the library to borrow copies. I missed out on a lot of hangouts with friends because I had to work, but in return, my GPA stayed almost perfect. Still, by graduation day, the difference hit me all over again. Rachel graduated with an average GPA in communications. My parents threw her a huge party with a DJ and a buffet. Me? I walked out with a 3.9 in computer science, and all I got was Mom's homemade lasagna at the dinner table. She smiled faintly and said, "We don't need to make a big deal out of it." In that moment, I finally understood. Fairness was never coming from my family. If I wanted a place in this world, I'd have to build it myself. Not long after, I left that house with a couple of old suitcases and one brand new belief: my life isn't meant to be the backdrop for someone else's spotlight. When I left my parents' house, I had nothing but a couple of suitcases, an old laptop, and a burning determination to stand on my own 2 feet. I rented a tiny apartment in North Dallas, just big enough for a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's TV every night. But to me, it was heaven. For the first time in my life, I wasn't handing over rent to my parents, and I wasn't living in Rachel's shadow. My first job was as a programmer at a mid-sized software company. The office was in an old building with an elevator that squeaked and groaned every time it moved. My starting salary wasn't much, but to me it was everything. I'll never forget holding that first paycheck in my hand, my heart pounding. I could pay rent on my own place, buy my own groceries, and not stress over every single dime. I didn't live fancy. I cooked for myself, packed lunches in plastic containers, skipped weekend outings, so I could stay home learning new coding languages or reading about real estate, something I'd been curious about for years. Every month, I set aside a little money into a savings account I named Dream House. On summer afternoons, I drive my beat-up car through leafy suburbs lined with oak trees. I'd stop in front of small wooden cottages with wide porches and gardens in the back. And I'd imagine the day I'd walk through the door of my own home, a place where no one had the right to demand or control anything. While I was quietly building my life, Rachel's path was different. She married Mark, a charming guy with shaky career prospects. They had kids quickly, 3 of them within just a few years. My parents threw themselves into grandparenthood, babysitting on weekends, sending money, even buying a new car when Mark lost his job. I wasn't jealous of her having kids. But every time I watched my parents' unconditional support, something heavy settled in my chest. I remember telling my mom once that I'd just finished a big project at work. She brushed it off with a quick, "That's nice. I'm happy for you." And then, just like that, she switched to Rachel. "She's so overwhelmed this week. The kids are driving her crazy. We have to help her." In their eyes, my success was background noise. The spotlight was always on Rachel. Instead of growing bitter, I used it as fuel. I told myself, if nobody's going to invest in me, then I'll invest in myself. Every dollar I saved felt like a victory. Sometimes, just moving an extra $50 into my dream house account made me feel like I'd won something big. I don't know when that dream will finally come true. But I do know this: I won't let anyone take it away from me. While I was quietly building my career and saving every penny for the future, Rachel was living a completely different chapter. She'd married Mark, a man who could charm anyone with his words, but whose career was as shaky as a leaf in the Texas wind. From the start, I could see it coming. Mark bounced from selling cars to selling insurance to trying real estate, never lasting more than 6 months in any job. In just a few years, they had 3 kids. Lily, a 6-year-old with blonde hair who loved drawing on the walls. Ethan, 4, always clinging to his dad. And little Noah, just 2, still sleeping in a crib tucked into the corner of their bedroom. Their cramped rental house got suffocating fast. But instead of figuring things out, Rachel and Mark seemed to assume my parents would handle it all. And they did. When their old SUV broke down, my parents sent money without hesitation for a newer one. When Rachel complained, "These 3 kids are wearing me out," my parents were right there, babysitting almost every weekend while Mark stretched out on the couch watching football. Once, they even helped cover rent when Mark was out of work for nearly half a year. I'll never forget one evening when I stopped by to visit my parents. The living room was covered with toys. Rachel sat in the middle of the mess, sighing, "I'm so tired. I don't have a single minute for myself." My mom rushed to soothe her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll help. That's what family's for." I stood there quietly. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked about my job. In their eyes, Rachel was always the one who needed saving. I don't deny raising 3 kids is hard. But what hit me like a punch was the blatant favoritism. Me, the one who paid my own tuition, who lived on ramen for 4 years, never got a single dollar of help. Rachel? One sigh, and the whole family spun around to lift her up. I started sharing less and less about my life. I noticed that any good news I brought up quickly got drowned out by Rachel's next complaint. If I announced a promotion, within seconds Rachel would mention Ethan being sick or Mark losing another job. And just like that, all attention shifted back to her. One day, I tried talking straight with my mom. Why is it that whatever I do is small, but Rachel always gets special treatment? Mom sighed and gave me the same line I'd heard my whole life. "Rachel's more fragile. You're smart and strong. You don't need us to worry so much." I'd heard those words hundreds of times, but this time they landed like a sentence. I would always be the shadow. I would always be the one who could handle it. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and transferred another $200 into my dream house account. The new balance popped up on the screen, and my chest eased a little. If family couldn't be my safety net, then I'd build my own home in every sense of the word just for me. After years of saving, I looked at the balance in my dream house account and knew the moment had finally come. I didn't want to keep living in that shoebox apartment in Dallas, watching the rent go up every single year. I wanted a porch where I could sit on Sunday mornings, a little garden for lavender, and a bright kitchen where I could cook without bumping into walls. But there was one thing I knew for sure. My family could never find out. Experience had taught me that anything I did would quickly turn into a family project for Rachel and her crew. If I even hinted I was house hunting, it would instantly become, "We need to find a place big enough for Rachel, Mark, and the kids." So I kept it to myself. Most evenings I scrolled through Zillow and Redfin. On weekends I drove out to open houses. I told no one, not even my closest coworkers. But then fate decided to mess with me. A nosy coworker named Linda overheard me mention house hunting and shared it with one of Rachel's neighbors. From there, word spread faster than a Texas wildfire. A few days later, my phone rang. My mom's voice came through, full of excitement. "Laura, I heard you're looking for a house. Why didn't you tell me? We've got so many ideas for you." I tried to stay calm. "I'm just browsing. Nothing serious yet." But Mom wouldn't let it go. Her voice grew more insistent. "You'll need at least 4 bedrooms for the kids. And it has to be close to Rachel's, so it's convenient. Ideally with a big living room, so the whole family can gather." I froze. The kids she was talking about weren't mine. They were Rachel's. She had already decided my future home was the solution to my sister's crowded house. Not long after, Mom and Rachel started bombarding me with house links. Some days, I'd get a dozen messages: mansions with 6 bedrooms, houses with pools, garages for 3 cars. Rachel even added, "This one would be perfect for the kids." We'd finally have room to breathe. I went quiet, stopped replying. I muted the group chat and ignored the emails full of links. Inside, anger and exhaustion mixed together. Why did my small dream have to turn into everyone else's burden? Then, one quiet weekend, I found it. A 2-bedroom cottage in the suburbs, with a sunny porch and a little garden in back. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. This was my house. I put down the deposit, signed the contract, and held the keys in my hand, my heart trembling with joy. I didn't tell a soul. I let Mom and Rachel keep sending me their dream listings, while I quietly prepared for the day I'd move into the very first home that was truly mine. A week after I got the keys to my new cottage, Mom called with that voice you can't really refuse. "Dinner this Saturday. 6 o'clock sharp. There's something we need to discuss." My chest tightened. I already knew what it would be about. But I went anyway. I told myself, fine. Let's get this over with once and for all. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. Dallas at the end of summer was stifling, hot wind blowing down empty streets. The second I walked in, it was exactly what I pictured: Rachel's kids running wild, Mark glued to the couch watching football, Mom rushing around the kitchen, Dad muttering about gas prices. Mom glanced at me and said with a little bite, "Oh, look at you, on time for once. That's rare." I took a deep breath and sat down at the table. At first, it was all routine. Mark droned on about his latest temp job. Rachel complained about losing sleep because Noah kept her up at night. I nodded, kept my head down, focused on Mom's lasagna. But I knew the storm was coming. And sure enough, once the plate started to empty, Mom set down her fork and cleared her throat. "Laura, we found the perfect house for you." I almost choked on my water. "Oh," I said, trying to sound calm. Rachel jumped in, her eyes shining. "That's right. It's just a few blocks from me. 6 bedrooms, big yard, a living room where the whole family can gather. The kids would finally have their own rooms." Dad nodded eagerly. "Mark would have a proper office, and your mom and I could stop by any time. You won't find a better place than this." I sat there, staring around the table. Not one person mentioned what I wanted. No porch, no little garden, no quiet space. To them, my house was just a fix for Rachel's cramped life. Rachel smiled like it was already settled. "We can go see it together tomorrow." I set my fork down, my hand trembling slightly. "Enough." "Actually," I said, voice steady, "I already bought a house." The room froze. Even the kids went quiet. Mom's eyes narrowed. "What did you just say?" "I bought a 2-bedroom cottage outside the city. It's small, but it's enough. And it's perfect for me." Rachel's jaw dropped, her voice breaking. "A cottage? Laura, how could my family possibly fit in that? You won't, I said, calm but firm. It's not for you. It's for me. Mom's face turned red, her voice sharp. You made a huge decision like this without talking to your family? After all the work your sister and I put into finding you a house? I looked her straight in the eye. That wasn't for me. That was for Rachel and Mark. I don't need 6 bedrooms. I need a small home that's mine. Rachel let out a strangled cry. But the kids need space. Do you have any idea how cramped we are? And Mark doesn't even have an office. I took a deep breath, fighting the anger bubbling up. Rachel, that's not my problem. I worked hard for this, and I'm not giving it up just because you're struggling. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his glass rattling. You're being selfish, Laura. Family's supposed to help each other. When did you get so cold? I stood, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. No, I'm not selfish. I'm protecting what I've spent a decade working for. If that makes me the bad guy to you, then so be it. The table exploded. Rachel sobbed. Mom screamed that I was betraying them. Dad shook his head in disappointment. Mark just kept chewing like none of it mattered. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Mom ran after me, shouting, "You can't just abandon your family like this." I turned back, looked her straight in the eye. Watch me. Then I walked out into the heavy Texas night, drove back to my new house, my chest burning with anger, but also light with relief. I knew I had just crossed a line, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. I left my parents' house that night thinking the showdown was over. I thought once I drew a clear line, they'd have no choice but to respect it. But I underestimated just how tightly my family clung to their right to decide for me. Within hours, I realized I hadn't ended anything. I had stepped straight into a new storm. Not loud to my face, but relentless through calls, texts, and social media. The first message came from Rachel that same night. She sent a picture of her 3 kids crammed together on the couch, toys piled around them. The caption read, "Do you really think this is fair to the kids?" I stared at the glowing screen in the dark, my chest heavy. Then I set the phone down and chose not to answer. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. 5 missed calls from Mom, 3 long texts from Rachel. One of them said, "You're so selfish, Laura. You've changed. You're not the sister I used to know. You don't care about family." The words cut deep, but I knew the game. Guilt-tripping was their oldest trick. Then came Dad. His voice low and angry in a voicemail. "You're tearing this family apart. Think about your sister and the kids. Sell that house and buy something that works for all of us." I listened, throat tight, then deleted it immediately. But it didn't stop there. The fight spilled onto Facebook. One afternoon on my lunch break, I scrolled past Rachel's post, a photo of Lily and Ethan sharing a bunk bed, with the caption, "All they need is a little space to grow." Sad when family doesn't put family first anymore. Dozens of comments poured in, cheering her on. "You're such a great mom. How could anyone turn their back on your kids?" I bit my lip, my fingers trembling over the screen. I wanted to fire back, to scream the truth that I'd spent years scraping by alone while no one lifted a finger for me. But I knew if I did, I'd only look petty to the outside world. So I closed the app, heart pounding. Mom wasn't about to be outdone. She posted a picture of my new cottage. I still don't know how she even got it with the caption, "Sad when someone forgets where they came from. After all the sacrifices this family made, this is how we're repaid." Not long after, a coworker messaged me, "Laura, what's going on? Linda just told everyone in the break room you abandoned your sister and her kids to live in some huge mansion." I felt my face burn. My little 2-bedroom cottage had somehow morphed into a luxury estate in their version of the story. Every time my phone buzzed, a chill shot down my spine. I started silencing calls, ignoring voicemails. But even when the phone was quiet, the words echoed in my head: selfish, ungrateful, traitor. That night, I sat alone in my new house. The warm lamp light glowed against bare walls. I should have felt happy this was the dream I'd spent a decade fighting for. But instead of joy, I felt crushed under the weight of it all. I whispered to myself, why does my little piece of happiness have to turn into a war? And in that moment, I understood. The real battle hadn't even started yet. My family had never accepted no as an answer. And soon enough, they'd find a way to push beyond messages and Facebook posts. After weeks of tension, I thought things were finally settling down. I'd blocked Rachel's number, cut back on calls with my parents, and locked down my social media. My little cottage was starting to feel like peace, quiet afternoons watering the garden, weekend mornings with coffee, and a book on the porch. I believed the storm had passed. Then one afternoon, Mom showed up at my door holding a pie. Hi, sweetheart, I brought you pie. Apple, your favorite, she said, her voice so sweet it made my skin crawl. I hesitated. Truth was, I'd always preferred cherry, but she never remembered that. After a pause, I let her in. She set the pie on the table and glanced around like she was taking inventory of my house. It's lovely, Laura. You've done well, she said, running her hand over the back of a chair like she was testing the fabric. I stayed quiet, a strange heaviness in my chest. After a few minutes of small talk, she sighed. I'm sorry. Maybe things went too far. I just want the family close together. You've worked so hard, I know that. For a moment, I felt myself soften. But then she added, maybe next week I'll bring Rachel and the kids by. They'd love this place. It hit me instantly. The pie wasn't peace. It was reconnaissance. I steadied my voice. Mom, I'm not ready for that. I need time. Her smile stiffened, but she just nodded and left. When the door shut, I stared at the pie on the table, unease gnawing at me. A few days later, on a Saturday morning, I ran errands, grocery store, post office, a quick stop at Target. By noon, I turned down my street and froze. Rachel's silver SUV was parked right in front of my house. My grip tightened on the wheel, heart racing. Walking up the driveway, I heard laughter and children's voices spilling from inside. The front door was wide open. What I saw stopped me cold. Lily and Ethan sprawled across the sofa, crumbs and toys everywhere. Noah toddled around chewing on one of my throw pillows. In the kitchen, Mark raided my fridge, munching on a sandwich. And Rachel stood in the sunroom, rearranging my furniture like she owned the place. What the hell is going on here? I yelled. Rachel looked up, smiling casually. Oh, Laura, I thought it'd be easier to move in while you weren't home. Mom gave me the key. My stomach dropped. Mom gave you a key? What key? Rachel pointed at the spare set I'd stupidly left on the counter when Mom visited. This one. She said it was fine. I felt blood rush to my face. Get out of my house. Now. Mark leaned against the fridge, chewing lazily. Come on, Laura. You're single. This place is way too big for you. It makes more sense for us to be here. I shook with rage. No more arguing. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 right in front of them. You're calling the cops? On your own family? Rachel gasped. Yes, I said, my voice like steel. 15 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers came inside, stern and professional. Rachel burst into tears, pleading. We just need a place to stay. She's my sister. How can she treat us like strangers? Mark chimed in. She doesn't even use all this space. We need it more. But the officers didn't budge. One turned to me. They don't have your permission to be here? That's right. This is my home. I want them out now. Within minutes, Rachel, Mark, and the kids gathered their things, even the snacks they'd just opened, and shuffled out. One officer asked if I wanted to press charges for trespassing. I thought about it, then shook my head. I just wanted them gone. Still, when the door closed, I felt shaken. My home no longer felt safe. The next morning, I called a locksmith and had every lock replaced. I also contacted a lawyer, asking for a cease and desist letter addressed to Rachel, Mark, and even my mom. It spelled out clearly, any more harassment or intrusion would lead to legal action. When I signed the papers, a wave of sadness and relief washed over me. I never thought I'd have to use the law against my own family. But in that moment, I finally saw the truth. The family they always talked about never really included me. It only meant how much they could take from me. I closed the folder and sat in my cottage, morning sunlight streaming through the window. The room glowed with calm, but inside, I knew the storm had just shifted. This wasn't the end, it was the beginning of an entirely different life. After the cease and desist letter went out, my phone and inbox went strangely quiet. No more constant texts. No more passive-aggressive Facebook posts. No more angry voicemails rattling in my ear. At first, the silence felt unsettling, like after a storm, when you still brace for the next thunderclap. But then it hit me. I finally had what I'd been chasing for years.
Peace.
I started enjoying the cottage the way I'd always pictured it. In the mornings, I opened the kitchen window, letting sunlight pour in as I made coffee. In the afternoons, I sat on the porch, watching the lavender-eyed planted sway gently in the breeze. Those little things proved something big. I was living a life that was mine. A life no one else could claim or turn into the family's property. Every now and then, my conscience tugged at me images of Rachel's kids packed into that cramped rental. But I reminded myself, I didn't cause that. I worked hard. I sacrificed my youth, saved every dollar, and built this from scratch. I don't owe anyone, especially not unconditional sacrifice for people who never valued my effort. Slowly, I began inviting close friends over. They brought food. We laughed in the kitchen. Their kids played in the backyard. For the first time, my house was filled with the right kind of noise-joy, not demands. Not pressure to give up space. That's when I realized, family isn't just blood. Family is the people who respect you, support you, and never see you as their lifeline. Looking back, I see it clearly now. For years, I wore the label of being independent, strong, doesn't need help. It sounded like praise, but really, it was just an excuse for my family to step back from responsibility. Now I understand I have the right to say no. The right to draw boundaries. And most of all, the right to choose a life not ruled by guilt. I don't know what the future will bring. Maybe there'll be attempts to reconnect, apologies mixed with demands. But this time, I'm ready. I've learned how to say no and mean it. If there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's this. Setting boundaries with family isn't selfish. Sometimes, it's the only way to protect your peace and your self-respect. And if you grew up in someone else's shadow, remember this. You deserve your own light too. If this story resonates with you, leave me a note. Or share it, so someone out there struggling with family favoritism knows they're not alone.